Hello and welcome to today's episode here at the Pilgrim's Well. We're having another session here of practical wisdom. Ben, we're going to look at the blessing of being provoked today. How do we look at this?
It's interesting when you think of provoked, our mind always goes to negative things. So during the week, what provoked us negatively? Were we driving? Somebody cut us off? Did we hear an insensitive comment from somebody? Something like that. When we think of the word provoked, we go negative. But interestingly, there's examples in Scripture where being provoked is a blessing. You can understand the heart of a person, you can understand what they value, and you can understand what matters to somebody when they take a stance, when they're provoked. So a clear example of this that we have in Scripture is Acts 17. When Paul's walking in, he sees the pagan idolatry going on Mars Hill. He's ultra sensitive to the things of God. Notice how the unknown God and the idolatry that he saw provoked his heart. And he just couldn't help but share the gospel with them. He was seeing the creation being worshipped and the creator being set aside as an unknown God sitting on the shelf. So people desiring to worship the creation rather than the creator, Paul walks in and he sees this. This provokes him. And in life, what provokes us is what matters to us. Sadly enough, normally what provokes us is our favorite sports team loses, or something happens, with our favorite whatever celebrity, whatever it is. Those kinds of things provoke us. But then there's other things that go on that either go under the radar or don't get our attention because we just don't really have a whole lot of concern for those things. Another example that we see with provoking is Jesus in Matthew 21, when he turns over the tables in the temple. He was upset that his father's house was being used for a way of making money. With the moneychangers, they were charging up to 12% for changing the money. And that was a half day's wage for some people. So Jesus is seeing people coming up to the temple for the purpose of worshiping God. And at the same time, he's seeing other people taking advantage of this with exchanging the money or exchanging the sacrifice. Most likely that what they were going to bring for the offering wasn't going to be good enough. It was going to be scrutinized to the point where they would say, okay, you can't use this here, use this instead. And when they would exchange that, they would make money on that. This provoked Christ. This provoked his heart. And he ended up turning over the tables in the temple, and we see that. So it's wrong for people to do this in the temple. Jesus saw this. They're profaning the name of God. They're disrespecting the name of God. And as a result, Jesus defended his God. He defended the Father. So we see these things, and we can now apply them to ourselves. In a sense, is being provoked, being provoked in a godly manner, is a blessing from God. It should motivate us. It should motivate us to get involved. It should motivate us to do our homework. It should motivate us to speak out in boldness because our God is being provoked. Our God is being profaned, like the Philistines did with Dagon when they brought the Ark of the Covenant next to him. Next day we see the Dagon's flat on his face. These kinds of things provoke God. And if they provoke God, our heart should be provoked as well.
What do you think is the reason? I think a lot of people are provoked when they're in the car, when they're driving, and somebody cuts them off and they get provoked. And I think even Christians can struggle with those kinds of provocations. Yep. But why do you think we are so insensitive nowadays of being provoked of the things of God?
I think we've adapted as well to the culture of our times, where, it goes back to the old analogy of the frog in the crock pot. You put the frog in the crock pot with cold water, he's going to be fine. But you slowly turn up the heat over time, you're eating him for dinner. And in our culture today, we have become so used to sin, so used to people just openly and intentionally profaning the name of God, that we become so used to it that it's just like, just another day. Where maybe 50 or 100 years ago, had they been doing something like this, it would have caused an uproar. So we get used to it. And I think another thing is a lot of times Christians get sucked in and actually become participants in that sin as well. So it waters down their zeal. It flattens out their passion. So they're actually got one foot in the world and one foot in the church. And in doing so, Jesus even said, I want you in extreme. I want you hot or cold. I want you passionate. And when you're lukewarm, I'm just going to spit you out of my mouth. And I think we're seeing that today in our culture as well. So ministry starts with being provoked. If we're not provoked, if our heart is not sensitive to the things of the Lord, our mind isn't going to be on the kingdom. Our mind's going to be on the things of this world. And if we're not calling out the sin or the false teaching of our day, we're not doing our jobs as Christians.
I think our insensitivity to being provoked by the things of God is also what we fill our ears and our eyes with, right? If we fill our eyes and ears with the things of the world, we become insensitive to the things that are wrong in the world. And if we fill our ears and eyes to the things of God, we become very sensitive to the things that are against God because our love for God grows.
It's true. And if we're filling ourselves with the things of the world, like you just said, we're not even going to be looking for the things of the kingdom. We're not going to be noticing the sin. We're not going to be noticing the false teaching. We're not going to be noticing the people who are suffering or asking the questions is where is God? Because we're so consumed over here and our focus is over here that we're not even seeing these other things. And if we do, like you said, our hearts are going to be so full of the world that we're not even going to care. Notice?
Yeah, I think it's a very unique thing. I think mostly we don't think about provoked as a good thing, but the Bible is very clear. And we should expect that, right? In a world that is considered or that's described as the world under the rule and the rule of the prince of the air, we are in a world that is constantly provoking us because we are pilgrims of a different kingdom in a world that has left God.
Right. And the thing about being provoked, too, is we don't want to be reactionary and emotional. We want to be in control of our thoughts, in control of our emotions, and in control of our words. Because we can have this passion and this godly zeal, but do a lot of damage with it as well. So it has to be holy. It has to be wise. Pray on it. All of those things. It just can't be knee-jerk reaction. We have to have a reason and a principle, and we have to be in control of ourselves when we're doing these things.
Let me just in closing, Ben, let me ask you, how do you, when you're provoked, you can do it in different ways, right? You can respond in different ways. Let's say you see somebody use the name of God in vain. Yeah. You can say, you shouldn't do that, and just walk away. How? Give us one or two tips of how to use that provocation in a way that is godly and God-honoring.
Let's say you're working with somebody and it's in a group environment and they're using the Lord's name in vain quite frequently. What you could do maybe on break time and when you're leaving for work for the day is pull the individual aside and privately say, look, I'm not trying to control what you say, but in a sense, you're using the Lord's name in vain. May I please ask out of respect that you stop? So doing it in a way that is non-confrontational, where you're imposing yourself on the individual or you're challenging the individual, because if you do that, they're going to fire back with at least that same amount of passion back and probably double it. You don't want to put your hand in a hornet's nest, but at the same time, it has to be addressed. So it's doing it in care, in love, and in genuine concern about what you're talking about. If the individual can see that this isn't something that you're trying to impose on them or trying to force on them, but rather it is a sensitive issue for you, and you do it in a respectful manner, most people will respond out of respect back. So I would say privately first, not publicly. If you do it publicly in front of all the men, they got to stand up, and it could become a pride issue at that point.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you also for watching here on The Pilgrim's Well at Practical Wisdom. We thank Ben for his insight to us today. We're praying that the Lord would use this video to help you to see the blessing of being provoked and also know how to be provoked and respond to that in a proper way. Thank you for watching. See you next time. I won't start too emotional. Let's see. Practical wisdom, the blessing of being cursed. All right, let's do this.
Oh, the blessing of being cursed? Wow.
Sorry, misspelled.
No, it says provolone. Provolone cheese.
All right. Shall we?
Yeah, let's get serious now.
Matt, pay attention.